Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham, and I'm the founder of Accepted and the moderator for today's Q&A. I want to welcome you all to ACE MMI, a live Q&A with two MMI experts, Dr. Herman Gordon and Dr. Barry Rothman. Both are, as I said, MMI experts and accepted medical school admissions consultants. I'll tell you more about their background and qualifications in just a minute. But MMI, those three letters, which stand for multiple mini interview, can both thrill and terrify med school applicants. They are thrilled to be invited to a medical school interview, and they are terrified lest they blow it, especially since the MMI, while increasingly common, seems to allow more opportunities to both blow and ace that interview. The solution, or at least a way to ease your anxiety, another three letters, AMA, ask me anything about the MMI. And whom are you going to ask? Dr. Gordon and Dr. Rothman. I'm thrilled to have on this show Dr. Herman Gordon, also known as Flash Gordon, and Dr. Barry Rothman. Dr. Gordon earned his bachelor's in biochemistry from Harvard and his PhD in developmental neuroscience from Caltech. He has been an associate professor at the University of Arizona Medical School, and while there also served as a member of, and then for 2 years as chairperson of, the admissions committee. The University of Arizona Medical School was one of the first to start using the MMI. Dr. Barry Rothman earned his bachelor's from Haverford College and then went to Caltech for his doctorate in biochemistry. Since 1986, he has been a professor of biology at San Francisco State, and for 19 years, he was San Francisco State's Health Professions Advisor and also founded several post-bac programs. His students in these programs had an 80% acceptance rate. He has years of experience preparing medical school applicants for interviews, including the MMI. Now, here's what we're planning for the next 50 minutes or so. I've prepared several questions for Dr. Gordon and Dr. Rothman, and I'm going to start with these prepared questions. But we all would love it if you post your questions in the question window and ask as many of those as I can. Now, the plan is we're going to do the Q&A for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to ask for a volunteer who will do a micro mock MMI or mock interview prep with Dr. Rothman, who has prepped thousands of students for MMIs. Dr. Gordon will provide feedback, and then we'll again return to Q&A. During the Q&A portion of the AMA, I'm going to choose the questions from those you send in that I feel have the broadest applicability. I'll ask the applicant or who posed the question, if I can unmute them, then the applicant can ask the question, and that way if Dr. Gordon or Dr. Rothman have follow-up questions, they'll be able to engage you in a dialogue. Now, you may post your questions at any times. The question window is available for you. Go for it. In the meantime, I'm going to start. Okay, and I'm going to start with Dr. Gordon. What is a typical MMI like?
In terms of like the format of the MMI?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the MMI was it's very standardized. It seems to be pretty much the same across the med schools that use it. The idea is that you will go from station to station, and at each station you'll have what's called a scenario. On the door to that station, there will be a prompt that you can read and think about for 2 minutes. Then a bell will ring. You'll go in and you'll introduce yourself to the interviewer. Or it could be an acting scenario where you've been told that maybe you're meeting somebody and there's some sort of issue, or maybe it's a potential, it's a possible patient, and then you'll go in and you'll just go in character and start interacting with the actor in that room. So you then have typically 6 minutes in the room to deal with that one single topic. And at the 5-minute mark, there's typically a bell that rings, and then you have 1 minute, and then another bell rings. You cannot leave the room early, and you need to leave the room after the second bell. And you sort of do your rotation through all the rooms, and you have 1 minute to just sort of get the previous station out of your head and get ready for the next station, and then it starts all over again with 2 minutes to read the prompt on the door.
And do you know what the focus of each station is before you go into it?
From the prompt on the door.
All right.
But
okay.
You don't know, like in advance of the whole session, what anything is going to be like during the session.
Okay.
Schools typically so the MMI comes out of McMaster, and McMaster actually sells these scenarios to schools, and then schools develop their own scenarios as well. The schools will have a large collection of scenarios, so they're not using the same scenarios for every session with students. So you're not supposed to post what the scenarios are, but it wouldn't help you anyway because they keep changing them from
Right.
session to session.
Right. Dr. Rothman, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that sounds very thorough. I think also in the MMIs, the participants are asked not to tell anybody what the scenarios were. Oh, word of honor.
Right.
Flash, is that something that you guys do at Arizona?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Or maybe even a document that they have to sign. So.
Oh, well.
Of course, this doesn't stop people, right, from posting on studentdoctor.net, but yeah, ethically, you're not supposed to.
Okay. And I'm also seeing the questions coming in. And Dr. Rothman, how do you recommend that applicants prep for the MMI?
Well, it requires some coordination. It's hard to prep just by yourself. It's possible, but it's harder. What we did at San Francisco State was actually to create an entire course that lasted a semester and met weekly. And one part of that course was practicing MMIs. Now, we didn't really know what the scenarios were. We just kind of made them up ourselves, which was fun to do, thinking about, well, what would be a challenging question to ask? But we made them up in 6 different categories. One was role play, and Flash mentioned that. It's some kind of scenario where you interact with a person. For example, you will be performing an intake interview with a middle-aged male patient that presents with insomnia. You can have a question about the US healthcare system. Here's an example. What are the 3 biggest problems presently facing the US healthcare system? You could have a standard interview question. What have you done to prepare yourself to enter health profession school? You could have an ethical question. You are a private practice doctor. Would you be dropping an insurer that doesn't pay well, even though some longtime patients would probably stop seeing you? A cooperative question or scenario. With a fellow interviewee, build a tower as high as possible using raw spaghetti noodles and marshmallows.
At least they could use Legos. It'd be a lot more fun.
And then competitive, take one side of the topic of euthanasia and debate it with a fellow interviewee. So we made up these different scenarios, and we had our students rotate through 4 scenarios. Each scenario was a mini multiple interview, a mini MMI, in that they had 1 minute to read the prompt, 4 minutes to respond, and then we gave them feedback for 1 minute. So we did this in a classroom setting. It was very effective, and students really took it seriously. It's one way to do it. And so you could put something like that together with your friends, or what I typically do with clients is practice MMIs using a video call. It's very effective.
Now, we are going to have a mini practice MMI, I think, at the half hour. So if any of you are interested in doing that, please indicate so in the question window. Flash, one more question for you, and one more question for Dr. Rothman. I'll try and stick with the more formal title and last name. I'm obviously used to being on a first name basis with you. And then we'll get to the applicants' questions. What is the admissions committee evaluating in the MMI?
So I guess that's why do they use MMI?
Yeah.
Okay. So it used to be that interviews were all one-on-one. And then admissions committees very frequently complained that some of their interviewers weren't very effective and they couldn't compare one interviewer versus another. You know, like one person loved everybody they ever interviewed and the other person hated them all. And so there needed to be some sort of standardization. And so the idea of the MMI was that there are topics that reveal both the character of the applicant as well as their preparation for medical school. And what the admissions committee sees is for that particular station, that interviewer might have seen 10 students in that cycle. Well, they get normed, and then they get a Z-score, which is how far out they are, by standard deviations from that median for the group. Those scores help the committee a lot, but it turns out what's even more valuable are the comments that are written down by each of the interviewers. And there's some, the interviewers are trained and they're told, we're looking for these sorts of characteristics with these particular MMI scenarios. And so the idea is that what goes back to the admissions committee is something that's fairly standardized and fairly, it's much easier for the admissions committee to be able to understand. That said, I wanted to add two stations to what Dr. Rothman was talking about, which seem to be becoming more popular in the last 2 years, which is, the standard questions of like, why do you want to be a doctor? Why are you interested in our school? And these are things which, although they're in the secondaries, it's nice to actually hear it from the applicant's mouth. And so those take on more the character of a one-on-one interview. So, and then some schools even are going to like 6 MMIs instead of like 8 to 10, and then they'll have one-on-one interview. So they're trying to get the best of both worlds.
Okay. Dr. Rothman, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yes, when we prep our students, one of the things we emphasize is thinking about empathy. In other words, in some of these scenarios, somebody's having a hard time. And if you're hard-hearted and, okay, let's get the job done, you're not going to be connecting with this person. So your ability to empathize and authentically empathize is really important. Also showing teamwork and working under pressure. I think those are specific qualities that are being checked out in the MMI, plus others. But these are the ones that we emphasize when we prep our students.
Okay, great. And then again, for you, Dr. Rothman, what is the most common mistake that you think applicants make during an MMI?
Oh, well, I think one thing is
not
that
not the whole AMI, just the most common.
Right. I think what happens is they're really not prepared for this. And so they go into some emotional shutdown, or they're really scared and their brain goes blank, things like that, which is why practicing is a great idea. That helps you take the fear out of it and really be yourself. But some people are really surprised at the scenarios and feel unprepared or blank out.
Okay. Dr. Gordon, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree totally with Dr. Rothman. That's the biggest issue. Some schools will discount the first station if the student does poorly on it. Just because of that, you sort of walk into the first one and it's like, what am I doing here? And then they get that out of their system, and then all the rest of the stations go well. So
I think I talked to somebody recently who said that they throw out the worst station, whether it's the first or the third or whatever it is. They just kind of drop it.
Kind of like Olympic scoring.
Something like that. Yeah. All right, let's get to some of the applicants' questions, because there are a lot of good questions here. And if I mispronounce somebody's name, please forgive me. Durga asks, and actually, I'll tell you what, I am going to unmute Durga and let him, like I said before, and go from there. Okay, Durga, you can ask your question about filling up time with your answer to a MMI question or in an MMI scenario. Are you there?
Sure. Yeah. Hello.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. And that's exactly how you pronounce my name. And thank you everyone for doing this.
You're welcome.
My question was about, I know that you had mentioned the time restrictions, and something I was wondering was, should we, I guess, after preparing our answer, after reading the prompt and going in, should we try to fill up much of the time, or should we anticipate that we'll be asked follow-up questions?
A good interviewer will ask you follow-up questions.
Okay.
That said, not all interviewers are good. And so there could be an awkward silence. I think if in your preparation, when you're looking at the scenario on the door, come up with like 3 things you want to talk about. And when you do that, it'll naturally fill up the time. It's like, okay, I'm going to spend 2 minutes on this one, 2 minutes on that, 2 minutes on the third one.
Okay. That's
I would
very
add,
helpful. Thank you.
yes, I would add that what Flash mentioned, which is to essentially have mental bullet points, is a really good way to deal with almost any interview situation. Instead of memorizing a script, to have a few key ideas that you know you can get to, and maybe enough key ideas so that you'll never run out of time.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Great advice. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answers. All right, I want to now, let's see. Okay, Chandler, can you ask your question about when you go into a scenario in which there is an actor and whether to be in character or not be in character?
Sure. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So my question was, when you go into a room for a scenario in which there's an actor, are you to immediately
Can you maybe turn off your speakers though, because we're getting a lot of feedback. Otherwise, I'll just do it for you. If not, I'll do it for you.
Yeah, I don't know how.
Okay, all right, then I'll do it. But thank you. All right. So the question is. I guess I'm on mute. Now she is.
Yeah.
Now she's on mute. Let's see. Okay. When you go into a room for a scenario in which there is an actor, are you to immediately be in character when you step into the room, or is it proper manners to shake their hand and introduce yourself? Who wants to go first?
I can.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
When we practiced, we didn't do any polite handshaking or anything. We expected our students to begin in character.
Okay.
But Flash, what was your style?
So you can introduce yourself to the observer in the room, but that's optional. You definitely would not shake hands with the actor, right? So that's supposed to be in character.
Okay. Let's go to the next question. And this is, okay, somehow, I don't know, we still got Chandler's sound going there, even though I have muted her. All right, let's keep trying with this. If not, I'll just speak them. Dao, are you ready to be unmuted? Please turn on your speakers. I'm going to unmute you. And the question is the one that you asked about, again, are you required to speak the whole time, or is it supposed to be more conversational?
Right. This is actually very similar to the previous question you received, but I guess my real question was, I guess I was worried about spaces and time. Like, say you finish early and the interviewer doesn't have any questions. Is it okay to sit there and prepare yourself for the next one, just mentally? Is that a thing?
Dr. Gordon?
So as an interviewer, I always feel bad when that happens. I will try to extend on their answers. Sometimes it happens just because the student is so well prepared Say it's an ethical question and they had it in their medical ethics course. Well, it's like 1, 2, 3, we're done. Right? So I will then try to ask questions that are related to it. But the whole idea is to give you as an applicant an opportunity to present yourself. And so that's part of my job as an interviewer. In the end, what's important about the whole interaction is what that interviewer writes down and sends back to the admissions committee. So if you're just sitting there thinking about something else, that could, it's probably not going to help what goes back to the admissions committee. So, if you're really desperate, you could ask them about, what do they do at the med school, and, how they like the students there, whatever it is that you're curious about, that's a genuine question. You could try to fill the time that way, but you want to have a good interaction with that interviewer, and you want to make maximum use of the time that you have available there.
Okay, thank you.
I totally agree. I think dead air during an interview is painful for everybody, and Flash is a compassionate interviewer, and so he will help fill in. But if your interviewer isn't so compassionate, then I think you should figure out ways that you can keep the conversation going and while still being authentic.
Okay, thank you.
Can't hear you, Linda.
We have an interesting question here. There we go. From Norman, and about euthanasia. Go ahead, Norman.
So my question is, suppose you had that euthanasia MMI scenario. Suppose that your clinical experiences somehow involved patients who typically might be, candidates for euthanasia. Could you draw on your own experiences when formulating your response?
Yes, by all means. It depends on what the scenario is asking you. If it's asking you to give a balanced view of euthanasia pros and cons, then you can draw on your experience, but you want to cover both sides of the question. If you're asked to debate with somebody and you're stuck with one side, then stick with that side. And again, you can draw on your experience, but definitely follow what the prompt tells you.
Dr. Gordon, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree. Whenever you have your own experiences to bring up, that's very valuable. It helps reflect on you. What I have seen that backfires is where somebody tries to shoehorn in their experiences into a prompt that doesn't really relate to those experiences. So make sure it's really on topic when you do that. So in your case, it's definitely appropriate, but just make sure that when you bring in your experiences that it really fits.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Maureen has a great question on standing out.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so I was wondering, how can you stand out in your MMI? What is something that you can do or say that would make them more interested in you as an applicant?
And I assume when you're talking about standing out, you're talking about standing out in a positive way.
Yeah.
Of course, yes, yes.
I would say this is for probably all of life, is be authentic, be yourself. It's very easy to detect when people are trying to act in a way that's not really who they are. And the thing that speaks the most loudly is just being yourself and being connected to yourself. So that's what I would do. I would not strive to stand out. I would more try to be connected with myself and be really who I am.
Okay. Thank you.
Flash, do you have anything to add to that?
So that's really excellent advice. When you first said stand out, I thought of some applicants who stood out in a very negative way, and I'm sure tubed their applications as a result. So, yeah, I think the people who are genuine stand out.
Okay, thank you.
I would add that, you know, it's easy to feel competitive in these situations and to compare yourself to other people, real or imagined, and to not get caught up in that. You know, the kinds of comparisons people make are often distorted, and so just be yourself and not worry about it.
Right. Awesome. Thanks.
Okay. And then Joy has, I think, a great question. Again, I'm going to unmute her. Joy, are you there? You had a great question about not knowing the answer. You there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Hi, Kim.
Yeah, we hear you. We hear you. Go ahead.
Perfect. Well, my question is that what if you get asked a question that you don't know the answer to? Like, for example, you get asked, you know, something political or something ethical that you just don't know.
Great question.
Yeah.
And thank you for this.
You're welcome.
One thing that we practiced was a question like that, to ask our students a question they couldn't possibly know the answer to. The one we did was, what do you think about the gross national product of Mongolia?
Oh, gosh. That's mean.
Well, we wanted to see what they would do with a question they probably didn't know the answer to.
Right.
And I think the thing to do is to reflect on that. What do you know about Mongolia? What do you know about economics? How can you relate to that question in any way, shape, or form? That's one way. I think Dr. Gordon probably has some other ideas, but that's what we suggest.
We've never used questions like that. So
you are a compassionate interviewer, like Dr. Rothman said.
Yep.
I get assigned the MMI station, so I don't get to choose that. And you know, the McMaster questions aren't really built that way too. So I think it's more like if you happen to get a local question that's sort of off the mark. But I agree with Dr. Rothman that, you know, there's this classic business school question: how many dump trucks would it take to move Mount Fuji? Right. And it's basically that idea that, well, what can you bring to bear on this? Right. We don't expect you to know practically anything except maybe how tall Mount Fuji is and maybe how big a dump truck is, right? So now work with it, do something with it. I was also going to add that sometimes the question may be a little weird. And so you can go in and you can say, okay, you know, the prompt stated this, I'm interpreting it in this way. Is this how you want me to go? So you can ask for feedback on your understanding of the prompt. I wouldn't do it routinely. It should be authentic. You know, so some students are trained to do that at every station, and it's a waste of half a minute. But if you are confused about it, then, and it's genuine, then go ahead and ask. And the person who's interviewing you will definitely put you on the right track because they want that 6 minutes to be valuable.
Okay, great. I think it's time now for the mini mock interview. And Carrie has, sorry, I think I have the wrong name there. Carson has graciously agreed to do this. So I'm going to again unmute Carson. And I guess Barry,
Hello?
you're going to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we hear you. Great.
Okay, thank you for choosing me and letting me speak. I haven't had much practice with MMI, so we'll see how it goes. I'll do my best.
Yeah, here's your chance for some practice. Okay, Carson, I'm going to give you paint a scene for you. and we'll give you maybe 20 seconds or so to think about it. You would have more time in a real MMI. This is a mini MMI. So Carson, if I gave you $1 million, what would you do with it?
If you just gave me $1 million, just no context?
Yep. No context, tax-free.
Well, since I'm in school right now, I could, easily pay off that. I'd probably save a bunch of it. Yeah, I'd probably donate it to some charities that I like or that I'm interested in. But yeah, mostly just save most of it probably and, go to the college fund.
And what about being a little more quantitative?
I'm sorry?
Be a little more quantitative. How much would you give to what?
Okay, well, I would, I'd probably give like maybe half of it to the National Cancer Institute, just because I've had a personal, family experience with cancer, and so I'm just, passionate or I'm interested in that. But yeah, but definitely save, at least enough to cover what medical school would be, and then the rest of my undergraduate, and that should be good enough for me. Anything else? Maybe I can buy my dad a new car. Anything that needs to be fixed around. But yeah.
What kind of car would you get your dad?
My dad's always wanted a Toyota. Oh, I can't remember the name, but it's a truck. I know he's talked about it before, but he drives an old, or it's kind of broken down now, but it's an old Ford Explorer, and so I think yeah, getting him that truck would definitely make him happy.
Okay, well, we can stop here.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Gordon, you have comments?
Okay, so Carson, why do you think you were asked this question?
Probably just to see my interests, how I value money or things that I value, how giving I am. Personally, I think I'm very comfortable myself, so I didn't see myself taking a lot of money just for what I need to pay off student loans, whatever. But yeah, that's I think.
Yeah, good. So a couple real positives here. So when you started out, you said, oh, there's no context to this $1 million, right? And so that's very good that you're clarifying the question. And it was a very genuine clarification, right? And then the other one was that when Dr. Rothman asked you about being quantitative with this, right? You said that you wanted to give a half to the National Cancer Institute, and that there was a reason for it, right? So that's important to back up what you say, your own connection to it. So you did that very well, and overall, you came across as a genuine person. I didn't get the feeling at all that you were faking it or trying to provide the answers that we were looking for, right? So.
Thank you. I was expecting more of an ethical question, but yeah, I think the fact that it was a simple question kind of made me a little more conversational.
Good.
Can I?
I'll give you a score. I'll give you an 8 or 9 out of 10.
That's pretty good.
Thank you.
So that's pretty good. Yeah.
That's great.
Actually,
Did either of you think that Carson maybe would have done better had he taken a few more seconds to think about his response first?
Or we had given him a few more seconds, yes. Yes. I mean, these scenarios can be total surprises, and you have to think quickly.
And is part of the purpose of it to see how well the applicant thinks on his or her feet.
Yes. I would like to add, Carson, I don't know if you noticed this, and I don't know if other people noticed this, but you said a number of times and a few times. And that actually detracts from your presentation. Having to lecture for 30 some years, I've erased the ums and you knows from my speech in general. Oops. But it's good to not do that. I think it makes you seem more polished and more together as a respondent. Just those little cosmetic changes. So it's worth thinking about.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Dr. Gordon, you wanted to say something?
I've forgotten it now.
Oh, well, if it comes back.
It'll come back probably in the next.
Okay. All right. All right. Anything else on this mini mock interview, or ready to move on? No? Okay. Well, Carson, thank you again very, very much. And we're going to go back to your questions. Okay. All right. Anne, you asked a really interesting question about notes, and actually somebody else asked that question too. Let me unmute you. Here we go, Anne. Whoa, 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 whoa. I guess we won't do that. Okay. So I will ask your question for you, Anne. And the question is, which was also asked by somebody else very similarly, are we allowed to bring a legal pad into the interview and jot down our points?
No.
Okay, that's easy. It's good to know.
So you're gonna walk into the room with nothing, just you.
Okay.
And of course, that's a good way to practice.
Yeah.
Don't practice with notes.
Yeah, I think it probably also makes sense to kind of practice mentally organizing a response, so that you know, all right, I have 3 points. I want to make, these are the 3, boom, boom, boom. All right, and then
I've been asked by a client if it was okay to bring their latest data to show off, and that's could be appropriate for a one-on-one interview, but it's not appropriate for the MMIs. They tell you cannot carry anything into the room.
Actually, that leads to one question that I had prepared, but I didn't ask earlier, and that is, what is the MMI providing the medical schools that the traditional interview, the traditional one-on-one did not? Obviously, you have multiple opinions on the candidate. That's one obvious thing, but is there anything else?
It's
Dr.
the
Gordon.
standardization.
Mm-hmm.
So I've noticed since the MMIs were implemented, they've had an influence on the one-on-one interviews when they're still done at schools. In particular, I've seen a number of schools now giving their interviewers specific questions that they want asked, or ask 2 out of these 5 questions of every candidate that you interview. So that allows the admissions committee the ability to compare 2 applicants on the same question.
So there's more standardization, basically.
Right.
Okay.
I would add that it shows, I think, some more human dimensions. Of course, those can come out in a standard interview, but I think given the role play situations and the cooperative and competitive situations, I think it shows off a broader range of your skills and humanity.
Okay. All right. Calvin had an intriguing question, and I think it's a great follow-up on one that was posed earlier. Now, Calvin, you are at the moment muted by yourself, so I can't unmute you. You're going to have to unmute yourself, and if not, I'll just ask your question. Okay, which is okay. All right, I'm just going to ask it because apparently they can't or doesn't want to unmute. All right, so when we are met with an unusual scenario we are not prepared for, how should we mentally prepare in the moment? So, Dr. Gordon, why don't you go with that one, and then Dr. Rothman can add to it.
I think your preparation for these should be that you're not anticipating anything in particular. you're going in with a mindset that you will deal in broad ways. So like if you have an ethical question, you want to be able to identify all the interested parties, and so they're kind of simple, broad rules like that. And so you should be able to think about anything. Right? And I think that should be part of your practice is, just somebody's asking you or putting you in these scenarios that you've never seen before. Well, do it on the spot. Don't write out your answers and say, okay, I have this collection of 60 answers and they're going to ask me only these, right? Instead, you want to, each time just take it fresh. Right?
Okay. Dr. Rothman, anything to add?
Yes. I think what Flash is saying, maybe another way of saying it is to learn to use your intuition. Intuition is very powerful, and sometimes we're trained not to use it, but it's quite useful. And it's not, thinking A plus B equals C. It comes out of your unconscious in a way. And so maybe practicing by using your intuition. What comes up for you when you get some scenario that you never even thought about? And with practice, I think you'll learn how to use your intuition in a really productive way. But if you're cut off from your intuition, then I think you're going to lose out on very valuable creative energy.
Okay. Hope that was helpful. Thank you. And now Bianca has a question. I just unmuted you, Bianca, and you can. Hi. Okay.
My question is, how do you positively stand out in cooperative MMI scenarios? Should you focus on taking more of the role of a leader or of a team player? And is it okay to kind of sit back and allow someone else to lead the interaction?
Okay. Who wants to go first?
I can do that. Sometimes I have my students practice what are called panel interviews, where there's several students and one or more interviewers. And one thing that I stress with that is to take in the opinions of the other people. In other words, you could try to be a hotshot and steal all the attention, but it's really much better to acknowledge the contributions of the other people or to appreciate it. And I think that makes for some good teamwork. And it stands out in its own way rather than trying to outdo the other person.
Dr. Gordon, do you have anything to add to that?
So I agree as always. I think one thing that is really effective, but there may not always be an opportunity for it, is somebody says something and then you ask a follow-up question of that person. And it should be a supportive question, sort of like looking for more detail or giving them an opportunity to expand on their thinking. What they're looking for is your ability to work in like team learning environment or a case-based instruction environment where you're working together to figure out a case or a problem. And to the extent that you can bring out from another person something valuable, that's a really important skill. And I, as a professor, want those kind of students. So.
Okay, great. I've also seen in business school, it's very common to have, I wouldn't say very common, it is not becoming increasingly common to have team-based interviews. And both my sons actually had team-based interviews when they were applying for jobs. And when you're in a group setting and you're having that kind of interview, it's the success of the group that counts. So any contribution you can make to the group's success, whether it's taking a back seat or taking a front seat, that's what you want to do. That's what's going to be most impressive. And again, that's in the business context, the professional context, but it sounds to me like it would be very much the same in an MMI context. Is that correct? Okay. All right, the next question is from Anna, and Anna, I'm going to unmute you. Please ask your question.
Yes, thank you. How are scores typically distributed in terms of presentation, organization, and content response, or does this vary on the school?
Flash, you want to start with that one?
So it is going to vary by the school. A lot of schools just sort of leave it open. It's this Likert scale, you know, from 1 to 10. I use the Likert scales very broadly, so I will give out 1s, I'll give out 10s. That said, schools, I'm starting to see this, well, they'll give out, so they'll have like a rubric, and they'll have like 3 parts of that rubric, and they'll say, you know, 3 points for this, 3 points for that, 3 points for the last one. And so it does vary school to school. Is that what you were asking though?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, she said yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Rothman, anything to add?
Well, you know, I didn't have a lot of experience with that. Flash really knows that situation. In our practices with students, we really didn't give them scores. What we did was we gave them feedback as to how to improve their responses.
Okay, great. Now, Durga just wrote into the question window. I'm not sure if this is helpful, but at some of the schools, you are actually able to write down notes. They tell you beforehand, and I was told this was allowed at 2 schools. So again, there are a lot of differences among the schools, quite clearly. And I think unless you're told that you can bring in a pad and paper, you either should ask or assume it's not allowed.
My guess is they would give the students the notepads.
Oh, okay. Okay.
To make sure that there's nothing written in there. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. But thank you for, and she says yes, exactly. So, but thank you very much for the comment. That's very helpful. And then they were taken back. Okay. So, well, that was very, very helpful. Thank you for that comment, Durga. Now, Maureen, I'm going to unmute you because you had a really interesting question about political or ethical questions. And I believe it was okay before, so I'm just going to do it. Maureen, can you ask your question, please?
Yes. So for ethical or political questions, I know that you have to state the pros and cons and give both sides of the argument, but at the end, should you state what your opinion is so that you seem decisive rather than indecisive, or should you kind of try to stay neutral because what if the interviewer has different views? Or I know with political questions, you kind of, those can be a little difficult with, you know, the political climate and everything. So.
Dr. Rothman.
Well, I think you're going to have to use your judgment in terms of the situation. It could be that, you know, it feels like the emphasis is on having a debate or having a balanced presentation. But if you feel, and I guess you would have to use your intuition or maybe even ask the interviewer, can I add my personal feelings about this situation? So it's a tough call. I don't think there's a standard answer to it. You really have to go with the situation and do your best. Flash,
Okay.
do you want to?
Yeah. Sometimes an interviewer will ask you, you know, well, how do you feel about this? And you can hedge your answer. You know, you can say, you know, this is something, you know, I'm thinking about, but I haven't come to a final decision. I think what's more dangerous is if you start out in the very beginning, there is one answer to this, right? Yeah, I've had students do that. You know, 2 people died. This person has to go to jail forever, right? You know, absolute, right? There's no no consideration. So that doesn't reflect so well, right? But And your opinion may be a considered opinion. You're not rigid, you're not locked. You haven't written these things down on stone, and that's okay. So.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome. Norman, I'm just going to read his question. Is it bad to keep looking at your watch to just keep track of time? Barry, go for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that. As an interviewer, I would not like my interviewee looking at their watch all the time. It conveys a sense that you don't want to be there.
That's for sure. It may be true too.
It may be true, but don't broadcast it. Another thing, actually, posturally, that I've seen a number of times with interviewees is to sit there with their arms crossed in front of their chest. Very defensive posture. It looks terrible. So don't do that, and don't look at your watch. And actually, what looks nice in an interview is if you lean forward a little bit. So you're not back against the chair, but you're just leaning forward a little bit to show your interest.
Okay. Dr. Gordon, do you have anything to add to that one?
No, that's good. I like the leaning forward.
Okay. All right. All right. Nat asked a question and doesn't have a mic, so I'm just going to read it. What should you do in a bad cop situation where the bad cop interviewer is throwing you off? Any suggestions, gentlemen? Thank you, Nat. Dr. Gordon, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I've never been a bad cop, and I've never had a scenario where I'm supposed to be one. But what I have seen fairly frequently is in the acting scenarios. They'll tell you one thing on the door, and you go in with certain expectations and certain preparation. All of a sudden, the actor will throw something at you. And it's like, oh, no, it's not at all what I thought this was going to be. So what do you do, right? And again, that's like Dr. Rothman's intuition. You have to practice so that you're always on your feet. So.
Okay, Dr. Rothman, you have anything to add?
Well, yes, when we did practices, one of the roles I enjoyed the most was being the weird interviewer and asking challenging questions or being a difficult person. Not off the charts, but just somewhat difficult. So I think it's good practice. And, in your career as a health professional, you're going to have lots of people that you're going to have to deal with who are going to make you uncomfortable and are going to be hard to understand or off the wall. And so it's really good practice to learn how to respond to that without losing your grounding.
Yeah, that's for sure true. Okay, so I am going to unmute Crystal. She had a very good question also. So.
Hi, thank you both for taking the time to answer our questions. I'm Crystal. I just wanted to know, so I've been told I speak a lot with my hands, and I just wanted to know how you as interviewers look on that. Does it seem negatively if someone is too, I guess, animated while they speak? Should I try to suppress that? Just wanted to get your views and opinions on that.
Interesting.
Go ahead, Dr. You're on.
Yeah, I love it when people use their hands when they're speaking. It adds to the communication, right? It's part of the process. And yeah, be enthusiastic. That's who you are. Be it. So.
Great, thank you.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. Although I have got my hands under the table right now and gesticulating privately.
Okay. Chandler has a follow-up question on the pro-con political kinds of situations, and that is your answer allowed to be, I'm talking in my hands, I would be pro this depending upon the circumstances, or does that not count as coming to a conclusion? I'd be pro this under the certain circumstances, I'd be against it under other circumstances.
That seems like well thought out and clearly communicated. I would treat that positively.
Dr.
Yeah,
Gordon?
they're looking for you to have considered the issue. They don't expect you to have a conclusion.
Okay, great. I want to thank all the attendees for their outstanding questions. I want to thank Dr. Rothman and Dr. Gordon, both of you, for attending this AMA. I think it's been fantastic. And again, attendees, thank you for your time, your attention, your questions, all of it. A few reminders before you leave, and this is the most important one. If you like the practice, you can get a lot more of it, and you can get $100 off with our special gold mock interview package. You'll be getting emails about it. The coupon code is ACE, the MMI, and that coupon code will expire September 24th. Between now and September 24th, you can get $100 off the gold mock interview package. You're much better feeling confident when you head into the med school interview, and as both Dr. Rothman and Dr. Gordon said, feeling well prepared. I can't imagine any of you would perform if you play a musical instrument without rehearsals, without dress rehearsals. You're better off having your dress rehearsal with us than actually in the MMI room. That's number one. Number two, as you leave, please take a moment to complete our short survey. We really value your feedback. We're experimenting with this AMA format, and again, we value your feedback. Three, you can review this AMA. It is being recorded. Early next week, we're going to send out an email letting you know when it's available. Thank you again to all the attendees. Thank you, Dr. Gordon, Dr. Rothman, and best of luck with your med school applications and, of course, any interviews. Take care, everybody.